Hey, welcome back. You know, I grew up in a small town in Bangladesh, a place where everyone knew everyone, and a disaster was just a headline. It was your neighbor's roof gone, your cousin's field flooded. The community would rally, patch things up with whatever we had. But lately, watching the news from here in New York, seeing town after town, from California to the Carolinas, swallowed by fire or flood, I've started to see a different pattern. It feels less like a tragic rupture and more like a well-oiled machine kicking into gear. A machine with a lot of moving parts and a lot of people getting paid. I'm Ibnul Jaif Farabi, and this is the unraveling thread. Today, we're pulling on a particularly uncomfortable strand, the idea of a disaster industrial complex. Who really profits when your town burns? Let's start with the flames themselves. A wildfire rips through a community. Homes are reduced to ash. It's a visceral, terrifying loss. But almost before the embers cool, a different kind of machinery mobilizes. Not just the heroic firefighters, but the armies of insurance adjusters, the corporate disaster recovery firms, the private contractors whose trucks you'll see rolling in from 3 states over. This is the first layer of profit, the cleanup and reconstruction. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. These companies operate on a scale and with a speed that local builders simply can't match. They have the federal contracts, the pre-negotiated rates, the supply chains. And while their work is necessary, it often funnels money out of the devastated community. The profits go to corporate headquarters elsewhere, and the rebuilt town can start to feel less like home and more like a generic, outsourced project. But the financialization goes deeper into a second, more abstract layer. Think about the banks and the private equity firms. After a disaster, there's a desperate need for capital, for rebuilding, for businesses to restart. This is where shadowy financial players can step in, offering loans or buying up distressed properties and debt at a steep discount. They're essentially betting on disaster, or at least capitalizing on its aftermath. They might acquire large swaths of land, consolidate it, and reshape the community's future toward more lucrative, often less affordable, development. The disaster, in this sense, becomes a perverse form of urban renewal, clearing the way for new investment that the original residents might not be able to afford to return to. It's a transfer of wealth and ownership, masked as recovery. And we can't talk about profit without talking about the third layer, the very institutions meant to protect us, government agencies. Now, I'm an engineer by training. I believe in systems and solutions. But when a massive portion of, say, FEMA's budget goes towards post-disaster relief year after year, rather than into pre-disaster mitigation like fortifying infrastructure or managing forests, you have to ask, who benefits from this cycle? A constant state of emergency justifies larger budgets, more administrative power, and a revolving door with those big private contractors. It creates a dependency where being prepared is less politically visible and less immediately profitable for certain interests than being a heroic responder. So we keep funding the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff instead of building a fence at the top. This isn't about cynicism. It's about tracing the thread, from the physical rebuilding to the financial reshuffling to the bureaucratic incentives. A catastrophic event sets off a cascade of capital. And this creates a terrifying inertia. When powerful entities profit from the breakdown, what is their incentive to truly prevent the breakdown? When a town's tragedy is another company's quarterly earnings, the entire economic model surrounding disaster becomes skewed. Resilience, the kind built locally, slowly, and sustainably, doesn't generate the same kind of rapid, massive returns. Prevention is quiet. Profit is in the response. I find myself reflecting on this from my own dual perspective. As an engineer, I'm fascinated by mitigation, the brilliant, unsexy work of flood barriers, fire-resistant materials, smart grid technology. As an entrepreneur, I understand how capital flows toward opportunity. What unsettles me is seeing these two truths collide and watching the capital consistently flow toward the consequences of failure rather than the innovations that could prevent it. It's as if we've decided that building a better ambulance is a better business than eliminating the need for it. So, what do we do with this uncomfortable knowledge? The unraveling thread doesn't end in despair. It ends in clarity. First, we have to follow the money in our own communities. Who is holding the contracts for disaster preparedness and recovery? Are we investing in local capacity? Second, We have to demand that our political narratives shift from a rhetoric of pure response to a relentless focus on prevention and community-led resilience. It means voting for the fence at the top of the cliff, even if it's not as dramatic. And finally, it's about seeing the connections. The wildfire in California, the flood in Kentucky, the hurricane in Florida, they're not isolated tragedies. They are linked by systems that can, consciously or not, commodify our suffering. The true antidote to a disaster industrial complex isn't to stop rebuilding. It's to build a world where the rebuilding isn't so endlessly, tragically lucrative. It's to value the quiet, persistent work of stewardship over the dramatic, expensive cycle of rescue and recovery. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Unraveling Thread. If this conversation resonated with you, please share it with someone. It's through these discussions that we start to see the patterns and begin to weave something stronger. For more from me, Ibnul Jaif Farabi, and the entire team, visit our production home at Light Not Studios. https://www.lightnotstudios.com. I'll be back soon with another thread to pull. Until then, take care.